The big meeting room was huge. It could fit beings from all over the galaxy. Some creatures floated near the ceiling. They looked like living crystals and made rainbows when light hit them. Other aliens needed special tanks with different air to breathe. These tanks were lined up against the walls, making soft humming sounds. In the north part of the room stood the Vraken. They were the scariest-looking aliens there. Each one was 3 meters tall, much bigger than a human. They had hard shells like giant insects and sharp jaws that could cut through metal. Their eyes were made of thousands of tiny parts that could see in all directions at once. Ambassador Grixtal was the leader of the Vraken group. He was old and had fought in many wars. His shell had marks and scars from 70 different battles. He had seen terrible things and survived them all. He was not afraid of anything. At least that's what he thought. Then the humans walked into the room. The big doors opened quietly. 3 humans came in. 2 of them wore dark uniforms. They had guns on their belts that everyone could see. But these 2 were not special. They looked normal. Average height. Average size. Their skin was soft and pink. It looked weak compared to all the shells, scales, and armor that other aliens had. But the 3rd human was different. His name was Gregory Kane. He wore a perfect dark gray suit with a white shirt and a dark red tie. His black shoes were so shiny they reflected the lights from the ceiling. He did not carry any weapons that anyone could see. His hair was neat and had some gray in it. He walked slowly and calmly like he knew exactly where he should be. The whole room became quiet. It was not the suit that made them quiet. Many aliens wore special clothes. It was how he wore it. It was the confidence. The way he moved said that he belonged there. He looked calm and sure of himself. Grixtal felt his jaws twitch. This was something his body did without thinking when danger was near. This was strange. This small, soft creature with no weapons made him feel more nervous than armed soldiers did. Kane walked to where the human group was supposed to stand. He did not sit down. He stood with his hands behind his back and waited. His eyes were pale blue like ice. They moved across the room looking at each group of aliens. When he looked at the Vraken, Grixtal felt something he had not felt in many years. He felt like prey. The meeting leader was an alien with many long arms like tentacles. His skin glowed with different colors. He started the meeting. The problem was simple to explain. The Vraken had taken over some planets that humans said belonged to them. These planets were in a place called the Kepler Corridor. The Vraken said the planets were theirs because their people had been there a long time ago, thousands of years before humans even left their home planet. Humans had only been on these planets for about 50 years. The Vraken said this was not long enough to claim the planets. Grixtal stood up to speak. His voice was loud and strong. Computers in the room changed his words into hundreds of different languages, so everyone could understand. He talked about ancient rites. He said Vraken blood had been spilled on those worlds long ago. He said humans were too new to space to claim old Vraken territory. His speech was perfect. He had evidence. He had old records. He had proof. The Vraken had spent months getting ready for this meeting. When he finished, Gregory Kane stepped forward. Kane did not speak loudly. He did not need to. The room's computers carried his voice perfectly. Something about the way he spoke made everyone lean forward to listen carefully. He spoke for exactly 12 minutes. He did not show any papers. He did not quote any laws. Instead, he told a story. He talked about a young human colony on a planet called Kepler 7. 20,000 people lived there. They were trying to build new homes on a hard world. There were families, children, people who had traveled very far through space to start a new life. He described their first harvest when they grew food. He talked about the schools they built. He told them about gardens that people planted in soil that was hard to work with. Then he described what happened when Vraken warships came to that planet. He spoke with no emotion in his voice. He was not angry. He did not accuse anyone. He just told the facts. The Vraken ordered everyone to leave. Families were separated. People had to leave their homes. The crops were burned. The schools were knocked down. The graves where dead people were buried had to be left behind. When he finished talking, the room was completely silent. Then Kane did something that made Grixtal's body scream danger. He smiled. It was not a warm, friendly smile. It was not a threatening smile either. It was something worse. It was a smile that said he knew exactly how this would end. He said quietly, almost like he was just chatting. Ambassador Grixtal talks about ancient rites, about blood and history. He is correct. Those are powerful claims. But I wonder if the Council has thought about what message we send today. Do we tell our people that might makes right? That a bigger military can just take what it wants from those too weak to fight back? Because if that is the rule we are making, I promise you, humanity will remember it. The threat was not spoken directly, but everyone understood. Every species in that room knew about humanity's reputation. Humans had been in space for only 50 years. In that short time, they had fought 3 big wars. They had won all 3. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the most advanced. But they were the most stubborn. When humans decided something was worth fighting for, they did not stop. They learned. They adapted. They found new ways to solve problems that other species never thought of. The room stayed silent. Even the floating crystal beings who usually moved all the time had stopped moving. They dimmed their lights. Grixtal found himself thinking hard. His species valued warriors. They respected strength. But watching this human in his suit, speaking calmly about families and broken promises, Grixtal realized something important. This was not weakness pretending to be civilized. This was something far more dangerous. This was strength so great it did not need to show off. This human did not need to shout or threaten, because he knew his species had options the Vrakan could not imagine. Kane stood perfectly still, his pale eyes moving from one group to another. He was not asking for sympathy. He was not begging for justice. He was simply making sure everyone understood the situation clearly, and somehow that was more frightening than any army. Kane continued speaking. His voice never got louder. It never changed. He talked about precedent. This meant he was talking about what this decision would mean for the future. He said this choice would send a message to every small species in the galaxy. It would tell them what happens when the strong take from the weak. Then he said something that made many aliens shift nervously in their seats. If the Council rules that being on a planet first does not matter, that only ancient claims count, then humanity will respect that decision. We will follow Council law, but we will also apply that rule to everyone equally. There are 47 human colonies on worlds where we found old ruins. These ruins show that someone lived there before us. Under this new rule, those worlds would be open to be taken back by whoever lived there first. If anyone can prove they were there before us, by any means they choose. The meaning of his words spread through the room like a wave. Dozens of species had colonies on worlds where they found evidence of older civilizations. Most of those older civilizations were extinct. They had died out or left those worlds thousands of years ago. Some had simply disappeared. But if the Council said that ancient claims were more important than current colonies, it would create chaos. It would take centuries to figure out who really owned what. Worse, it would establish that might makes right. That the strong could take from the weak and call it justice. Kane had just turned the Vrakan's best argument into poison. Their claim that they were there first would now threaten every colony in the galaxy. The silence continued. Grixtal could hear his own breathing, the soft sound of air moving through his body. His combat instincts were screaming at him. But there was no physical threat to fight. Just a human in a suit standing calmly waiting. The Council leader called for a break. Everyone needed time to think. Grixtal walked back to the private room his group was using. His advisors gathered around him. Their jaws were clicking nervously. Commander Thrix spoke first. He was in charge of the Vrakan military forces. That human carries no weapons. He shows no aggression, yet every instinct I have tells me he is the most dangerous being in that room. How is this possible? Grixtal sat down on the special platform built for Vrakan bodies. He had been thinking about exactly that question. He understood now. The suit was not just clothing. It was a message. It said, I do not need armor because I am not the one who will be fighting. I do not need weapons because I have something more powerful. I have billions of humans behind me. And every single one of them will remember what you did to our colonists. The scary thing about humans, Grixtal had learned, was their ability to work together. Other species had hive minds where everyone thought the same thoughts. Humans had something else. They had stories. They had shared anger. They could remember bad things that happened to them and turn that memory into focused action. Kane had just told the story of Kepler-7 to the entire galaxy. By tomorrow, every human in known space would have heard it. They would see the pictures of families forced to leave, children crying, homes destroyed, and they would remember, humans did not need a hive mind. They had something more dangerous. They had empathy that could turn into anger. This feeling could spread across billions of people. All of them would move in roughly the same direction. And Kane, in his perfect suit with his careful words, was the tool that focused all that potential energy. He did not need to threaten. The threat was there in every human who would see his speech. They would hear about this council meeting, and they would prepare for what might come next. A younger diplomat named Sarvex spoke up. His voice was uncertain. Perhaps we should consider a compromise, shared control of the disputed sectors, joint development rights. It would save face for both sides. Grixtal's jaws clicked in what was like a bitter laugh for his people. You still do not understand. Kane does not want compromise. He wants precedent. He wants the council to rule clearly that colonial rights matter, that established settlements cannot be displaced by force, because that ruling does not just protect his colonies. It protects every vulnerable species in the galaxy. He stood up. His shell creaked. And if we force him to accept less than that, we will have earned the permanent hatred of a species that has already proven they can defeat opponents with far greater military power. They will remember this. They will prepare. And the next time we clash, we will be facing a humanity that has spent decades developing specific ways to counter every advantage we have. The room became quiet. Commander Thrix looked worried. Are you suggesting we give up? Grixtal moved to the window. He looked out at the space station's center where hundreds of species were walking around together. I am suggesting we recognize when we have lost. Not on the battlefield. Here. He touched his chest where his brain was located. Kane destroyed our position without firing a shot. He made our argument toxic to every other species in that chamber. He offered us a choice. Back down gracefully or become the villain that justifies human military buildup. Sarvex shook his head. But we are the Vrakan Empire. We have conquered 17 star systems. We do not retreat because a human in a suit asked politely. Exactly. Grixtal turned to face his group. He did not ask. He did not threaten. He simply showed us what would happen if we continue. And that, my friends, is why he is more dangerous than any warrior I have ever faced. A warrior I can fight. This human? He makes fighting the wrong battle entirely. The break ended. They returned to the main chamber. Kane was exactly where they had left him. He was standing calmly behind the human area. His suit was still perfect. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes watched every delegate as they came back in. Grixtal felt like he could feel the weight of human history behind that gaze. The meeting leader's tentacles moved in the patterns that meant the formal session was starting again. The delegates settled into their places. The various species arranged themselves in their zones. Translators hummed to life. Gregory Kane remained standing. His hands were behind his back. He had not moved during the entire break. One of the human security officers had brought him water, but the glass sat untouched. It was a small thing, but several delegates had noticed. The human could stand perfectly still for hours. No moving around. No restlessness. Just complete control. Another message. Another demonstration that this was not an ordinary negotiator. This was someone who had refined himself into a precise tool. Every gesture was deliberate. Every word was chosen. Every moment was controlled. The meeting leader began with the usual formalities. Then he opened the floor for closing statements. The Vrakan had the option to respond to Kane's earlier presentation. Grixtal stood up. He had spent the break deciding what he would say. His advisors had written 3 different speeches. Each one was carefully designed to save face while allowing the Vrakan to back down. He spoke for 5 minutes. He acknowledged the tragedy at Kepler-7. He expressed regret for any suffering caused to human colonists. He proposed a formal negotiation system for resolving territorial disputes through talking rather than military action. It was, by any measure, a complete surrender. The Vrakan Empire would leave the disputed sectors. They would recognize human colonial rights. They would pay for damages. When Grixtal finished, whispers moved through the chamber like waves. Several groups seemed shocked. The Vrakan never backed down. They were conquerors, not diplomats. But Grixtal had lived long enough to recognize when a battle was truly lost. Kane stepped forward. For the first time since entering the chamber, his expression changed, not quite a smile. Something closer to acknowledgement. Respect, perhaps. The human delegation accepts Ambassador Grixtal's proposal. Humanity has no interest in humiliating the Vrakan Empire. We seek only justice for our people and security for all species against the threat of territorial aggression. He paused. Then he added something that made Grixtal's respect for him grow even stronger. The Vrakan are formidable warriors with a proud history. Their decision today to choose diplomacy over conflict demonstrates wisdom that should be celebrated, not diminished. We look forward to building a constructive relationship based on mutual respect and shared interests. It was perfectly done. Kane offered the Vrakan an honorable way out. He changed their surrender into a wise strategic choice rather than a defeat. And in doing so, he made it easier for them to accept. This meant the resolution would last. A worse negotiator would have pushed for complete victory. They would have ground the Vrakan into humiliation. Kane understood something more subtle. Today's enemy might be tomorrow's ally. Giving them dignity in defeat made future cooperation possible. The council voted. The resolution passed by a huge majority. Human colonial rights were affirmed. The Vrakan would withdraw. A framework for future territorial negotiations was established. The meeting leader performed the closing ceremony. His tentacles moved in patterns that meant resolution and peace. The session was over. As delegates began leaving, Grixtal made his way across the chamber floor. His advisors made worried sounds, but he ignored them. He walked toward the human area. The two security officers became tense, but Kane raised one hand slightly. They relaxed. Grixtal stopped at a respectful distance from the human. Up close, Kane was even less impressive physically, barely 2 meters tall. Soft skin, no natural weapons. Yet Grixtal's combat instincts still screamed danger. Ambassador Kane. Grixtal's translator changed his sounds into words humans could understand. I wanted to speak with you personally. Kane nodded his head slightly. Ambassador Grixtal, I am honored. I have fought in 70 battles. Grixtal chose his words carefully. I have faced warriors from 20 species. I have killed enemies at distances from a few meters to across space itself. But I have never been more frightened than I was today, watching you in that chamber. Kane's expression did not change, but something in his eyes suggested he understood. Grixtal continued. You carry no weapons. You made no threats. You simply spoke. And yet you won completely. How? For a long moment, Kane said nothing. Then quietly, because violence is easy, Ambassador. Anyone can destroy. But building things? Protecting things? That requires precision, control, understanding. The suit is not a costume. It is a reminder. To me and to everyone else. I represent billions of people who want to build homes, raise families, live in peace. But they are willing to fight if they must. My job is to make sure they do not have to. He paused, then added, the most dangerous creature in any room is not the one who wants to fight. It is the one who understands exactly what fighting would cost, and is willing to pay that price if necessary. That is what you saw today. Not aggression, preparation. Grixtal felt his jaws click in acknowledgement. I think, Ambassador Kane, that the galaxy has underestimated your species. We saw you as young, inexperienced, emotional. We failed to recognize that youth also means adaptability. That emotion can become motivation. That inexperience does not mean weakness. It means you have not learned our limitations yet. Kane smiled slightly. That is the most insightful thing anyone has said to me in this entire negotiation. Yes, we are young. We make mistakes. We do not always understand the historical context or the ancient grudges that shape galactic politics. But we learn quickly. And we do not accept that something is impossible just because it has always been done a certain way. Grixtal's antennae moved. I will share something with you, human. The Vrakan Empire has existed for 12,000 years. We have rules for everything. Traditions that go back centuries. And today we broke almost all of them by backing down without military pressure. Do you know why? Kane waited. Because I have studied human history. Your species has been traveling through space for barely a century. But in that time you have fought 3 major wars and won all of them. Not because you had better technology. Not because you were stronger. But because you refused to accept defeat. Because when you were outmatched, you adapted. When you faced impossible odds, you found solutions no one else had imagined. Grixtal leaned forward slightly. The Kryn swarm had biotechnology thousands of years more advanced than yours, but you studied them, learned their weaknesses, turned their greatest strength into vulnerability. The Tarn Confederacy had ships that could fold space in ways your physics said was impossible. So you stopped fighting fair. You used psychological warfare, economic pressure, diplomatic isolation. You made them question whether victory was worth the cost. Yes, Kane's voice was quiet. We did all of that. Because we had to. Because the alternative was extinction or slavery. We are not proud of everything we did. War brings out the worst in any species. But we survived. And we learned. Exactly. Grixtal moved one of his large limbs in a gesture. And today I looked at you in your suit, speaking calmly about displaced colonists and justice and precedent. And I realized that if we forced this into a military conflict, you would do to us what you did to the Swarm and the Confederacy. You would study us, learn our weaknesses, adapt, and eventually you would win. Not because you are stronger, but because you are more determined and far more creative. He paused. The suit is genius, by the way. It says everything that needed to be said without words. You are not a warrior. You are something more dangerous. You are civilization itself, refined into a weapon. Kane's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested appreciation for the observation. The suit is just a suit, Ambassador. But you are right that it carries meaning. In human culture, formal business clothing represents something specific. It says, I am here to negotiate. I prefer peaceful solutions, but I represent enormous power held in careful check. The suit is civilization. The people behind me are the power. He straightened his tie. It was a small, deliberate movement. When I walk into a room wearing this, I am sending a message. I do not need armor because the force I represent is not military. It is economic, cultural, diplomatic. But if those tools fail, if negotiation proves impossible, then the people I represent will adapt. They will innovate. They will find solutions. And they will remember why they had to. That is what made you the most dangerous creature in that chamber. Grixtal clicked his jaws softly. Not strength. Not weapons. Potential. The potential for humans to become whatever they need to become to survive and protect what is theirs. Unlimited adaptability backed by unlimited determination. Kane nodded slowly. We prefer not to exercise that potential. Building is better than destroying. Creating is better than conquering, but yes, if we must, we will. A long silence stretched between them. Two beings from completely different evolutionary paths, completely different cultures finding common understanding. Finally, Grixtal extended one limb in the Vrakan gesture of respect between equals. Thank you for this conversation, Ambassador Kane. It has been educational. I suspect our species will work together more constructively in the future. Mutual respect tends to produce better outcomes than mutual destruction. Kane accepted the gesture, touching his hand to Grixtal's offered limb. Agreed. And Ambassador, for what it is worth, your decision today took courage. It is harder to back down than to fight when you are used to winning. The Vrakan have nothing to be ashamed of. Grixtal turned and walked back to his delegation. His advisors crowded around him. Questions tumbled over each other. What did he say? What did you tell him? Are we safe? Grixtal looked back at the human group. Kane had returned to speaking with his security team. His posture was relaxed. His suit was still perfect. Just another diplomat doing business, but Grixtal knew better now. That human in the suit was the most dangerous creature in the room, precisely because he did not look dangerous, because his power was not visible, because his threat was not spoken out loud. Are we safe? Grixtal's jaws clicked with dark amusement. As long as we do not give them reason to stop being civil. That man represents a species that can be the galaxy's best friend or worst nightmare. Today we chose to be friends. 3 months passed. The joint Vrakan-human expedition began exploring a previously uncharted sector near the Galactic Rim. The partnership worked remarkably well. Vrakan military precision combined with human adaptability and problem-solving created a strong team. Grixtal and Gregory Kane met several more times. It was always in formal settings. They always maintained proper diplomatic protocols. They developed something like friendship. It was built on mutual respect and the memory of that first meeting in the council chamber. Other species began to notice. The Vrakan, known for being aggressive and proud, were cooperating smoothly with humans. More diplomatic channels opened. More joint projects were established. The precedent set in that council session spread outward. It reshaped galactic politics in subtle but significant ways. 20 years later, a young Vrakan diplomat named Krixova was preparing for his first major negotiation. His mentor, the now retired Ambassador Grixtal, gave him one piece of advice. Watch the humans carefully, particularly their senior diplomats. They will come to the negotiation table wearing perfect suits. They will speak calmly. They will propose reasonable solutions. They will seem soft, civilized, non-threatening. Krixva had clicked his jaws in confusion. Then why watch them so carefully? Because Grixtal's antennae had moved with memory. The most dangerous creature in any room is often the one who does not look dangerous at all. It is the one wearing a suit instead of armor. The one speaking quietly instead of roaring. The one who has refined themselves into a precision instrument because they know that true power does not need to announce itself. He had paused, remembering pale blue eyes and a perfect dark red tie. Humans understand something most species take thousands of years to learn. Violence is simple, civilization is complex, and the ability to choose between them, to maintain civilization while keeping violence as an option, requires more strength than most beings can imagine. That is what the suit represents. Not weakness, not submission, control, choice, power held in careful check. And there is nothing more dangerous than a species that has learned to control its power while remaining absolutely willing to use it if necessary. The lesson spread. Other species began to understand what humans represented. They were not just another military power. They were something new, a species that could fight with terrifying effectiveness when needed, but preferred to build rather than destroy. Human diplomats became known throughout the galaxy. They were respected, sometimes feared, always taken seriously. When a human in a suit walked into a room, everyone paid attention, not because of threats, not because of displays of force, but because everyone knew what humans were capable of when pushed. And everyone knew that humans would rather negotiate than fight. But that preference was a choice, not a limitation. Gregory Kane continued his work for another 15 years. He negotiated treaties. He resolved disputes. He built alliances. He wore his suits and spoke in measured tones and represented humanity's best qualities. When he finally retired, there was a ceremony attended by delegates from 40 species. The Vrakan sent their highest honor guard. The crystalline beings created light patterns that spelled his name in 6 languages. Even species that had once been hostile to humanity sent representatives to honor his service. Grixtal, now very old but still sharp in mind, gave the keynote speech. He talked about that first meeting, about a human in a suit who changed the course of galactic history without firing a shot. I learned something that day. Grixtal's voice was translated into hundreds of languages. I learned that the most dangerous creature in any room is not always the one with the biggest weapons or the strongest armor. Sometimes it is the one wearing a suit, the one who represents civilization held in perfect balance with the capacity for overwhelming force. He paused, looking directly at Kane, who sat in the front row wearing another perfect suit. Ambassador Kane taught me that humans are not to be underestimated, not because of their military might, though that is considerable, but because of their ability to learn, adapt, and persist, because of their refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible. The room erupted in applause. Kane stood and bowed slightly to Grixtal. It was a gesture of respect between old colleagues, between former adversaries who had become allies. After the ceremony, they spoke privately one last time. They were both old now. Both had served their species well. Both understood that their first meeting had set them on a path that changed everything. "Do you ever regret it?" Kane asked. "Backing down that day?" Grixtal's antennae moved in the Vrakan equivalent of a laugh. "Every day for the first year. Then I watched what humanity accomplished, the treaties you negotiated, the alliances you built, the precedents you established. And I realized that day in the council chamber was the best decision I ever made." He leaned forward. "You did something remarkable, human. You showed the galaxy that strength does not require brutality. That power does not require aggression. You wore a suit instead of armor and spoke words instead of threats. And you were more effective than any army could have been." Kane smiled. "That was always the goal, to show that humanity could be trusted. That we were not just another expansionist species looking to conquer, that we valued cooperation over domination. But Grixtal's tone became serious. You also showed that you could not be pushed around, that there were lines that should not be crossed, that humanity would defend its people and its principles, that balance between peace and strength, that is what made you truly dangerous. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Two old beings from different worlds reflecting on lives well lived. The galaxy is better for what you did, Grixtal finally said. The precedents you set, the alliances you forged, the example you provided. Young species look to humanity now. They see that it is possible to be strong without being brutal. To defend yourself without becoming an aggressor. Kane nodded. That was worth more than any military victory could have been. We did not just protect our colonies that day. We helped shape what kind of galaxy we all want to live in. They parted as friends, as colleagues, as two beings who had learned from each other and made the galaxy a little bit better in the process. And somewhere, a new generation of human diplomats was being trained. They were learning about negotiations, about cultural sensitivity, about the delicate balance between strength and restraint, and they were learning about suits. About how the right appearance combined with the right words could be more powerful than weapons, about how representing civilization meant being strong enough to choose peace. The lesson of Gregory Kane spread throughout human space. Every diplomatic academy taught about that day in the council chamber. Students studied the speech. They analyzed the body language. They learned about the power of measured words and careful preparation. But more than that, they learned about what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of older, more established species. They learned that being young did not mean being weak. That being new to space did not mean being naive. One of those students was a young woman named Lisa Grant. She came from a colony world that had been threatened during the territorial disputes with the Vraken. Her family had been among those evacuated from Kepler-7. She remembered being a child, watching her home burn as Vraken ships enforced their claim. She also remembered returning home 2 years later, after Kane's negotiation. The colony had been rebuilt. The Vraken had paid reparations. More importantly, they had apologized. Some Vraken engineers had even helped with the reconstruction. That transformation from enemy to ally, from destruction to cooperation, had shaped her entire life. She dedicated herself to diplomacy, to following in Kane's footsteps. 15 years after Kane's retirement, Lisa found herself in a similar situation. A different species, the Xanther Collective, had claimed an asteroid belt that human miners had been working for a decade. The Xanthir were not as openly aggressive as the Vraken had been, but they were stubborn. They believed the asteroid belt was theirs by right of prior discovery. Lisa walked into the negotiation chamber wearing a dark blue suit. Her hair was pulled back neatly. Her shoes were polished. She carried no weapons. She had learned from the master. The Xanthir were insectoid beings similar to the Vraken but smaller and more numerous. They worked in swarms, thinking collectively. They did not understand individual human determination the way the Vraken had learned to. Their representative, a being named Thask, presented their case aggressively. They had survey data showing Xanthir probes had visited the asteroid belt 300 years ago. They argued this gave them prior claim. Lisa waited patiently. When her turn came, she did not argue about dates or legal precedents. Instead, she told a story. She spoke about the miners, about families who had left everything behind to work in those asteroids, about children growing up in space stations, about communities built in the harsh environment of the belt. She described the schools, the gardens grown in artificial light, the lives people had built. Then she talked about what would happen if those communities were destroyed, not just to the humans but to the precedent it would set. She pointed out that the Xanthir had dozens of colonies on worlds they had only visited briefly, before establishing permanent settlements. If brief contact was not enough to establish rights, then many Xanthir colonies could be challenged. She spoke calmly, without anger, without threats. But the implication was clear. The rule the Xanthir wanted to establish would hurt them more than it would hurt humanity. And then she made her offer. Shared development, joint operations, technology exchange. She painted a picture of cooperation that would benefit both species far more than conflict would. The Xanthir Collective debated among themselves in their strange way, their consciousness flickering between individuals. Finally, Thask spoke. We have heard of Ambassador Kane, of the Vraken situation. You learned from him? Lisa nodded. I did. He showed us that the most powerful weapon is not a gun or a warship. It is understanding. It is the ability to find solutions that benefit everyone, to turn potential enemies into partners. Thask's multiple eyes studied her. You wear the suit as he did. You speak as he spoke. You offer cooperation instead of demanding submission. But we sense the steel beneath. The willingness to fight if negotiation fails. Lisa smiled slightly. That is the human way. We prefer peace. We choose cooperation, but we are not helpless. We will protect our people and our rights. The suit is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of civilization, of control, of strength held in check. The negotiation lasted 3 days. In the end, an agreement was reached. Shared development, joint mining operations, technology exchange. The human miners kept their homes. The Xanther gained access to human mining techniques. Both species benefited. When Lisa returned to Earth, she was greeted as a hero. But she knew the real hero was Gregory Kane, who had taught humanity how to be strong without being brutal, how to win without crushing your opponent. She visited Kane in his retirement. He lived in a quiet house overlooking the ocean. He still wore suits, even in retirement. Some habits, he said, were worth keeping. They sat on his porch watching the waves. You did well with the Xanther, he said. I followed the negotiations. You understood what mattered. I learned from the best, Lisa replied. You showed us how to turn strength into diplomacy, how to make the choice to be civilized even when we have the power to be otherwise. Kane smiled. That is the secret, really. Anyone can be peaceful when they are weak. True civilization is being strong enough to destroy your enemies, but choosing not to, choosing instead to make them into partners. He paused, looking out at the ocean. The suit became a symbol for humanity. When we walk into a room wearing formal clothing with no visible weapons, speaking calmly and offering cooperation, we are saying something important. We are saying we are civilized. We are saying we prefer peace, but we are also saying we are not to be taken advantage of. Lisa nodded. The galaxy understands that now. When a human diplomat enters a negotiation, other species pay attention. Not out of fear exactly, out of respect. They know we will be reasonable. They also know there are limits to how far they can push us. That balances everything, Kane said. Too weak and you are prey. Too aggressive, and you are a threat that must be contained. But find the right balance, be strong enough to defend yourself but restrained enough to be trusted, and you become a partner. A leader, someone others want to work with rather than against. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Lisa asked, Do you think it will last? This reputation we have built? This image of the human in a suit? Kane considered the question carefully. It will last as long as we earn it. Every generation of diplomats must prove that we are still worthy of that respect. Must show that we still value cooperation over domination, that we still choose civilization over barbarism, even when barbarism might be easier. He looked at her directly. You and the others like you. You are the ones who will determine whether this legacy continues, whether the human in a suit remains the most dangerous creature in the room, not because of weapons, but because of wisdom. Lisa felt the weight of that responsibility. But she also felt ready for it. She had learned the lessons. She understood what it meant to represent humanity at its best, to be strong enough to choose peace, to be civilized enough to turn enemies into allies. I will do my best, she said. We all will, Kane smiled. I know you will. And as long as humanity keeps producing diplomats like you, the galaxy will know that the most dangerous creature in any room is still the human in a suit, not because of what we will do, but because of what we could do if we had to, and because we have the wisdom to choose the right path. The sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in brilliant colors. 2 diplomats, 2 generations, connected by a shared understanding of what it meant to represent humanity among the stars. And across the galaxy, in meeting rooms and negotiation chambers, humans in suits continued their work, building alliances, resolving disputes, showing that civilization and strength could coexist, that the most powerful weapon was not force but understanding. The most dangerous creature in the room was still the one who looked least dangerous. The one in the suit. The one representing billions of adaptable, persistent, creative humans. The one who preferred peace but was absolutely prepared for war. That was the human way. And the galaxy had learned to respect it. 50 years after Gregory Kane first walked into that council chamber, humanity had become one of the most respected species in the galaxy. Not the most powerful militarily, though their fleets were formidable. Not the most technologically advanced, though they learned and adapted faster than most. But the most trusted, the most reliable, the most likely to find fair solutions to complex problems. The symbol of the human in a suit had become universal. Other species began adopting similar practices. Young diplomats from dozens of worlds studied human negotiation techniques. The idea that true strength lay in controlled power rather than displayed force spread through galactic culture. But with respect came challenges. Not every species appreciated humanity's growing influence. Some saw it as a threat, others envied it, and a few actively worked to undermine it. The Helrix Dominion was one such species. They were old, powerful, and deeply territorial. They had watched humanity's rise with growing concern. In their view, humans were upstarts, newcomers who had gained too much influence too quickly. They decided to test humanity's resolve. The Helrix began a campaign of subtle aggression. They challenged human trade routes. They disputed mining claims. They made life difficult for human colonies near their borders. Nothing overtly hostile. Nothing that would justify military response. Just constant wearing pressure. The human diplomatic corps tried to negotiate. They sent delegations. They offered compromises. They followed every proper channel. The Helrix ignored them all. They believed that if they pushed hard enough, humanity would either back down or respond with force. Either way, it would damage humanity's carefully built reputation. After 6 months of escalating tensions, the Galactic Council called for a special session. The Helrix Dominion would present their grievances against humanity. It was, everyone knew, a test. A challenge to see if humans were really as reasonable as they claimed, or if their civilized exterior was just a mask. The human delegation arrived at the council chamber. Leading them was Ambassador Daniel Pierce, a tall man with graying hair and sharp eyes. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit with a silver tie. He walked calmly, hands loosely behind his back. He carried no visible weapons. The Helrix representative, Lord Vextor, was an imposing figure. His species was large and powerful, with thick armor plating and multiple limbs. He radiated confidence and disdain. Vextor spoke first. He listed humanity's supposed crimes: expansionism, economic aggression, cultural imperialism. He painted humans as dangerous newcomers trying to reshape the galaxy in their image. He demanded restrictions on human activity, limits on their expansion, oversight of their diplomatic efforts. It was fundamentally an attempt to reduce humanity to second-class status, to put them in their place. When Vextor finished, Ambassador Pierce stood. He adjusted his tie, a small, deliberate gesture. Then he spoke. Lord Vextor has raised serious concerns. We should address them. Let us examine each claim carefully. He went through the list methodically. For each accusation, he provided facts. Trade route disputes? Humans had followed established protocols. The Helrix had not. Mining claims? Human surveys were properly registered. Helrix challenges came only after valuable deposits were found. Cultural imperialism? Human culture spread because others chose to adopt it, not because it was forced. Pierce spoke calmly, without anger. He let the facts speak for themselves, and slowly the chamber began to realize what was happening. The Helrix had not challenged humanity because humans were doing anything wrong. They challenged them because they were threatened by human success. Then Pierce did something that surprised everyone. He thanked Vextor. Lord Vextor has done us a service. He has given us an opportunity to address concerns about humanity's role in galactic affairs. So let me be clear about who we are and what we want. He paused, looking around the chamber. Humanity is young. We are new to the galactic community. We do not pretend to have all the answers. We make mistakes. We are still learning. But we are committed to certain principles. We believe in cooperation over domination. We believe in justice over expediency. We believe in protecting the vulnerable and standing up to bullies. He let that last word hang in the air. Bullies. The implication was clear. We wear suits to these meetings. We speak politely. We follow protocols. Not because we are weak. Not because we are afraid. But because we are civilized. Because we believe that reason and law should govern relations between species, not force and intimidation. He stepped forward slightly. But let me be equally clear. Our commitment to civilization does not mean we will accept injustice. It does not mean we will be pushed around. It does not mean we have forgotten how to fight. We have fought 3 major wars since entering the galactic stage. We won all 3. Not because we wanted war, but because we were willing to pay the price for our survival and our principles. The chamber was completely silent. Pierce's voice remained calm, but the steel beneath was unmistakable. So I say to the Helrix Dominion and to any other species watching this proceeding, humanity seeks partnership. We offer cooperation, we extend friendship, but we will not be intimidated. We will not be diminished. We will not accept second-class status in a galaxy we have every right to be part of. He straightened his tie again. The choice is yours. Work with us as equals and we will be the best partners you could hope for. Push us, test us, try to break us, and you will discover what everyone else who tried that learned. Humans are very good at adapting to challenges. We are very good at finding solutions. And we are very, very good at surviving against impossible odds. He sat down. The silence continued for several long moments. Then, surprisingly, it was Grixtal who spoke. The old Fracken ambassador, now serving as an advisor to the council, rose slowly. His voice carried the weight of decades of experience. I have watched humanity for 50 years. I have negotiated with them. I have fought alongside them. I have seen them at their best and tested them at their worst. And I can tell this council with absolute certainty. Everything Ambassador Pierce just said is true. He looked directly at Vextor. The Helrix Dominion has made a mistake. You see the suit and hear the polite words and think you see weakness. You do not. You see strength under perfect control. You see civilization backed by the capacity for overwhelming force. You see a species that has learned to be dangerous without looking dangerous. His antennae moved in emphasis. I learned this lesson 50 years ago. I learned it the hard way. And I am telling you now for free what I paid dearly to learn. The most dangerous creature in any room is often the one in the suit. The one speaking calmly. The one offering cooperation. Because that one has nothing to prove. That one is secure in their strength. That one can afford to be civilized because they know they can survive being anything else if necessary. The council voted. The Helrix complaints were dismissed. More than that, the council formally censured the Helrix for their harassment of human colonies. It was a stunning rebuke. In the aftermath, several things happened. The Helrix, chastened, reached out to open proper diplomatic channels with humanity. Trade disputes were resolved. Tensions eased. Within 5 years, Helrix and human scientists were collaborating on joint research projects. More importantly, the lesson was reinforced throughout the galaxy. Humanity could not be intimidated. Their civilized approach was not weakness. Their preference for negotiation was a choice, not a limitation. And that choice was backed by proven capability and unlimited determination. Ambassador Pierce became a legend, joining Kane in the pantheon of great human diplomats. His speech was studied and analyzed. The phrase, "the most dangerous creature in the room is the one in the suit," became a common saying across dozens of species. Humanity had proven once again that true strength did not need to be displayed. That civilization and power could coexist, that the quiet confidence of the diplomat in a suit was more formidable than any show of force. And across the galaxy, in negotiation chambers and diplomatic meetings, humans continued to wear their suits. They continued to speak calmly. They continued to offer cooperation first and always, but everyone knew. Everyone understood. The human in the suit was not to be underestimated, not to be pushed, not to be tested. Because beneath the civilized exterior was a species that could adapt to anything, overcome any obstacle and win any fight they were forced into. The most dangerous creature in the room was, indeed, the human in a suit, and the galaxy was better for it.